think in terms of younger members who are rising stars, I'm looking at the sophomore class. Will Hurd from Texas, who very difficult election but came back, very popular with his colleagues, really has an expertise and a way of talking about issues that I think a lot of his colleagues find compelling and worth inspiring. Elise Stefanik from New York. Those are folks that I would look to, because if you think about the challenges, it really is going to be with the folks who have never served with a Republican president, right? Which is a good majority of the Republican conference. The guys who are chairman, they weren't chairman when George W. Bush was president, but they were largely around, and they understand the dynamics that take place between an administration of your own party and what that entails. I think someone like Elise Stefanik or Will Hurd will help maybe some of the newer members kind of understand that dynamic.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
To add on to that, I was looking at the Senate and specifically the Republican caucus. And messaging is easy, governing is hard, and you wouldn't think so, but governing when you control the White House and both houses of Congress can be even harder. Of the members of the upcoming and the incoming Senate Republican caucus, only 17 of them were in the Senate the last time that Republicans controlled the White House and both members of the House. And of those, 3 or 4 of them, Lisa Murkowski, John Isaacson, kind of came in those last couple of years, or they're in maybe their sophomore years. So, as we're looking at what legislation will look like, these guys getting their feet wet, getting on the ground, running, it's going to take them a little bit to figure this out and to figure out the best way to work with their counterparts in the House, because these are no longer message amendments or message bills. These are pieces of legislation that should they do it right will actually become law, but it's going to take them some time.
So on that, for Senator Schumer, again, likely minority leader, there may be just one step down, though. There's a possibility of a fight over the whip's job that's held by Dick Durbin right now. There's been some talk that possibly Patty Murray would be interested in the job. Who are the other players that Senator Schumer is going to lean on to make sure that his caucus stays together, regardless of who the whip is? I mean, who are those people that he's going to rely on?
Well, listen, I think that Senator Schumer knows, especially when you're in the minority and you don't have any control over the White House or either houses of government, that it's an all hands on deck kind of approach. So and Senator Schumer, having spent so much time at the DSCC, has relationships with the broad spectrum of members of this caucus. So you're going to see him rely on Senator Warren. You're going to see him rely on Senator Sanders, because there are going to be points in time where we're going to need to rally the left part of our base. There are going to be times when he's going to look at a Manchin or a Warner for some of the more moderate things that we're trying to do with Republicans. And as it pertains to a whip fight or a possible whip fight, I had the pleasure of working with Senator Durbin and Senator Murray as part of that. Leadership team still have connections and friends in both of those offices. I actually think this is going to work itself out, because the one thing that we don't need right now, and I think that the Democratic caucus gets this, is when you're out of power and you're in the wilderness, you tend to have you tend to maybe sometimes cannibalize yourself or start a circular firing squad. I think Republicans have had to deal with that a little bit, and I think that Schumer and some of these other members that have been there for a while don't want to see that happen again. So I actually expect for this to work out very well for all parties involved.
Speaking of the wilderness, Neil, you were there when, after President Obama was elected, you lost seats in 2008 after losing a bunch of seats in 2006, and you saw sort of like really what the Democrats are looking at now. You're just sort of looking into the void and wondering, what now? We need to figure out what to rally around. what sort of advice would you have for people who are in the wilderness right now, who are looking into that void and trying to figure out, what do we do now? Do we go all in on obstruction? There are very few options for them in the House, but in a certain degree, like the Republicans did find a way to define themselves in opposition to President Obama in 2009 and 2010, and then they won the majority in the House in the 2010 elections.
Yeah, I'm generally not in a habit of giving tactical advice to the other side, but
I'm not sure we take it.
I'm not sure you should, or maybe you shouldn't.
Counter-program.
But I am, because I think this is good for government, right? Absolutely true that the Republican minority, 2009, 2010, became defined by how we were opposing the president. I think two mistakes about that. One is I would not necessarily draw a direct line between that and gaining the majority in 2010. And two, there's kind of an untold story, or mistold in some cases, about how we got to that. So, President-elect Obama came in, he met with the bipartisan congressional leadership. First time on the agenda was some type of stimulus package. He told John Boehner and Eric Cantor, who I was working for at the time, we want your ideas. And we took him at his word. He was very serious about that, and I believe he was serious. We went back and we had this huge internal discussion with our ranking members and all these folks about, we feel like we got to give him something. He asked. We can't stiff the president-elect of the United States when he asks for our input. Do we go in with what we would do if we were in charge? Do we come in with, here's a capital gains tax cut, and here's all the things and we had a lot of folks in our caucus who were advocating for us to do that, because that's what we would do. And we said, you know what, if we do that, that's disingenuous. He won the election. They're in the majority. Let's offer things that we believe in, but that we think could be common ground. And it ended up becoming a 5-point plan that Eric took into the Oval Office once President-elect was sworn in. He looked at it and said, "There's nothing crazy here," and which we thought was a pretty good response for the ideas that we had put on paper. And we actually expected that from that we would actually be working together. And part of us was a little bit terrified about what that would mean and what that would look like to a lot of our members. What we didn't know was that a decision was made that our Republican votes weren't needed, and if they were going to get them, that the president and Pelosi were going to get them by giving us stuff that they thought we would like that we didn't ask for, but they assumed anyway. And you could imagine what our response was to that. That's not the conversation we tried to have. That produced the 0 Republican votes for the stimulus. And then from that, we never got back to what that opportunity was. I have no idea whether President-elect Trump will offer Leader Pelosi or Leader Schumer that opportunity. I don't have any great insight to that. But my advice to both of them would be that if he does, you should be serious about it and take it. And my advice to then President Trump would be, you should take that too, because that's the way that I think probably my friends on the other side have a chance of coming back. And frankly, it's also the same way that my friends on my side of the aisle have a legitimate chance of getting something done that's worthwhile for the American people.
It shouldn't be surprising that I remember this a little bit differently than my friend does. But I wasn't in the House, but I was in the Senate, and Senator McConnell even talks about this in his book that for him it was a strategy from the beginning to deny this president everything. Listen, I would like to, and I think right now, this is a conversation that perhaps Democrats should be having in 2 months, not 2 days after an election, especially an election that they all thought they were going to win, and most Republicans thought that they were going to win. You go through the 5 stages, and then you kind of pick yourself back up and you start thinking rationally again. I think that there are a lot of people right now that as it turns to anger, would say, give this president nothing, and give the people what they wanted, which is Trump and the control of both houses to the Republicans, and see what happens, and then reap the rewards. I don't necessarily know that if that's in congressional Democrats' DNA, You know, they believe in government. I'm not saying that Republicans don't. I'm just saying that they believe in government and wanting to legislate and wanting to be a part of the